Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and excuse me, thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a number of surveys that sort of seem to have popped up around the same time, suggesting, again, sort of international coordination here, but claims that, and this is only in sort of Western countries and only in where the governments are globalist controlled and where the globalists are doing everything they can to gin up race and gender conflict. It only happens in these countries, these sort of crazy studies. But they're supposedly that 1 in 3 or 30%, 1/3 of all women are being regularly sexually harassed on public transport. It could be trains or buses. So let's just have a look at this. Now, the definition of sexually harassed is broadened very considerably. So if it's direct sexual harassment, as in, I don't know, having your ass grabbed or something like that, then they're not talking about that, although it would include that as I understand it. They're talking about things like unwanted staring, or when you're in peak hour public transport where everyone's packed in like sardines. They're claiming that somebody pushing against you or being flush up against another person, assuming it's a male, and you're a female, then that is sexual harassment. So now that's an incredible stretch to say that's sexual harassment. And it includes overt things like, say, someone making lewd comments, for example. That possibly would qualify. But they're talking sexual assault here. Now, sexual assault must involve either threat of doing something or doing something physical. Now, they came up with another one, an interesting one, which included what they call upskirting. I only discovered this upskirting thing. I'd never heard of it before. A couple of years ago, I guess, 3 years ago, possibly at the most. And it was, I was having a barbecue where there were some lawyers there, and they mentioned that they were doing an upskirting case in court. So it's actually an official crime. Upskirting actually is a crime that you can charge somebody with, or the police can charge somebody with, and they can go to court, and it's serious enough that it's heard by a magistrate. It's not even like a junior flunky judge or a registrar or something. It's actually heard by a senior or relatively senior jurist. Upskirting, and upskirt, as I understand it, at least, upskirting is where a man, I think only men can be guilty of it, where a man looks up a woman's skirt somehow. Now, I don't know how you do that. How would you actually do that? It seems to be physically difficult. I suppose if the woman had a very short skirt, maybe you could do it, and she was tall and the guy was short or something. I don't know how physically that would happen. Do men sort of suddenly dive on the floor and just roll up and down the floor looking up skirts? Is that what happens? So we're supposed to believe here that in a packed train or bus, where again you're packed in like sardines, it's serious sort of cheek to jowl type compression, that men are able somehow to look up a woman's skirt while you're all packed in that tight. I'd like to see is it a gymnast or something? Only gymnasts do it. I don't know how that's even possible. But anyway, so the range of activities that is now considered a sexual assault has broadened out of all. Also, I mean, the nearly all of them are not sexual assault. I thought that guy was looking at me. Now, again, if you're in a packed train or something like that, yeah. Now, this I'm just looking at one now. It's actually from London and or England, and I think it's Greater London, as best I understand it, with a sort of London government, city government that is absolutely fixated with ginning up race and gender conflict. So it's no surprise they've come up with this. But this is around any globalist controlled country. They're trying to destroy all social cohesion, and whether it be amongst race or gender or along race or gender lines, they're going for it aggressively. And this, as far as I'm concerned, is just one more example of this. So, but as a headline, 1 in 3 women sexually assaulted on public transport. It's a fucking emergency. When in reality, if you look at even their own numbers, which are heavily ginned up in my view, these include so many things that aren't sexual assault, and then they throw that. If you look at the actual sexual assaults, they're hardly any. Now they're also saying majority of sexual assaults occur during peak hour transport, where people are packed in like sardines. And when you include things like someone pressing up against you, which is unavoidable, by the way, when I have people pressing up against me in packed public transport, but I never think I'm being sexually assaulted. I've never seen it that way. I think it's largely a matter of interpretation, but maybe it does happen. But I've never seen. I don't know any woman who's been sexually assaulted. No, I suppose there must be some, but I don't know any. And so there's a very unique sort of group of people. Maybe they're all gender studies students that are claiming it. But I'm just looking at if you go and drill down into the data collecting, the way they collect data and who collects the data, more importantly, you see a very heavy overrepresentation of gender studies academics and students, and in that a very heavy overrepresentation of lesbians. So we've got ideological fanatical lesbians who assume that all men are rapists, Nazi fascists, coming up with a survey that says all men are racist, Nazi fascist oppressors, and so on. So that's hardly surprising, and you've got to assume that the government, or whoever's commissioning the survey with your taxpayer money, deliberately selected people who were most likely to come up with this. If they'd got a bunch of straight white men to do it, they would have come up saying, well, there is effectively no instances, or there's hardly any instances of actual sexual assault. Now the activists and the journalists have all got horror stories. Oh, well, my daughter got raped 50 million times, and that was just going round the block. You get those sort of stories, but you can dismiss those as nonsense. But given that they concede that the majority of these things are in peak hour, packed in like sardines, where it would be very easy to assume or think, if you're an angry lesbian who hates all men, and you're in a packed, for example, train carriage, and all around you are men pushing against you in a tightly packed carriage, which it is. That's normal for the peak hour. That's nothing. So then you could assume, they're all straight white men, or they're all straight men, and I hate men, and they're all trying to rape me with their capitalist, fascist, sexual proclivity. People like that would see it that way in their haze of madness, and they would make those ridiculous interpretations, which would be, of course, untrue and unfounded. Nor could you prove it either way. So just looking at that in perspective, you can really dismiss the claims. And now there's further allegations that 20% of people lay charges. Now, how do you lay charges on a stranger? I don't know how you do that. Is it possible? There's the complete carriage full of strangers, and yet you're able to somehow get charges against somebody. Or what do you do? How's that even possible? And especially if it's for things like staring, or supposed staring, or alleged staring, where there is no strict definition of what is or isn't staring. Why is it that there's a hugely disproportionate amount of lesbians that are making these claims rather than straight women and so on? So anyway, there's all these sorts of things, or chances looking for some sort of a payout or a shakedown and that sort of thing. But so those things aren't done. Now, I just want to look, some years ago, what was doing the rounds again, all across the Western world and all across the globalist controlled, ginned up, create gender division industry, which is huge, very well funded. They were saying that at the end, this 1 in 3, by the way, is a favourite number. They just love it. 1 in 3, 1 in 3, and they throw this out across all areas. 1 in 3 women are violently abused by their intimate partner, or by I think it was a family member or something like that. And when and I went and got, because it was just insane, the claims it was making. But again, you see that same pattern of rollout, the same propaganda architecture, if you like. The people commissioned to do the survey were gender studies academics, again, heavily overrepresented with lesbians. And they were commissioned taxpayer dollars to do this by a left-leaning government that wanted a headline, because they wanted to say they were bringing out new laws to protect women. But why are they bringing out this new? Well, there's this epidemic of violence against women. Evil men, fascist Nazi men. But we, your big, tough, strong, hairy-chested He-Man government, we are going to protect you girls against those men doing bad things to you. And this, they came out with this, these ridiculously cosmetic type laws. The whole thing is a prearranged circus. But anyway, the survey, again, they'd given it to a radical activist group. And again, the radical activists, to get the outcome, had to expand the definition of what was, family violence and that sort of thing. But I went and got the raw data. I get this again some years ago. And it annoyed me because you just know it's untrue. You know it's been ginned up to the max. So I went and got the raw, which took some doing, by the way. I went and got the raw data and went through it, and to even the extent that it might be accurate, because again, you've got radical activists that are collecting the initial data, and they've got every incentive to gin it up. So I'd say they'd be gathering and putting a spin and interpretation on things that would heavily favour the predetermined outcome that all men are violent rapists, basher, abusers, and da-da-da. So I had to look through it, and they, in order to get the ginned up number, they had to remove the race of the men. So the highest number of abusive violent incidents were actually from non-white men. So black and brown men by far and away committed. So, at the time there was, say, 70% of the population, male population, was white, but they were only committing, even in the ginned up numbers, 10% of the abuse, but 30% of the black and brown population were committing 90% of the instances of abuse, and the black population in particular, committing the much higher proportion of that. So white men really didn't figure, or white people didn't really figure. Then they added in violent gay lesbian incidents. And I hadn't realised just how many violent lesbian incidents there were. Apparently it's a common thing. I didn't, not that I ever thought about it beforehand, but apparently that's a common thing. So once you took out from the white, so once you took out the lesbian, or even they included things like brothers and sisters having a tiff, that was included, or even where the mother was a strict disciplinarian, but the father wasn't, they would still claim that was a sort of a male type thing because it was a male household, that type of stuff. So they did everything they could to make it look like it was men. The reality was, though, that straight white men, unless they were sort of off their face on drugs or something, but straight white men were by far and away the smallest component of this, and in fact it was quite rare. And they also were using allegations of it rather than actual proven court cases and things like that, or where charges had actually been formally laid. So they were very they cherry picked quite carefully, but they came out with the results appeared to suggest that it was straight white men are the problem, and they're running around, beating their wives, and it's a middle class straight white male problem, not a problem anywhere else. Where in fact the reverse was the case. As a middle class straight white male, the chances of a woman getting beaten up or something, she's more likely to die of choking on a sandwich, or just a close second behind it would be getting struck by lightning. And though it's that rare, whereas it's quite common in other areas of the population. But this was all swept aside in order to produce the headline, and then the government responded that they need to bring out laws. This particular leftist government, they have to bring out laws to stop those evil straight white males, which just coincidentally and very conveniently also happened to be the major obstacle that the globalists perceive. Straight white males want accountable government, they want impartial courts, they want codified laws, they want free and fair elections. Straight white males, therefore, they want merit-based education and job promotions. Straight white males are the biggest obstacle to the globalist project. Therefore, they have to be demonised at every turn and in every way possible. And that really was what it was all about. And I see this thing about 1 in 3 women being sexually harassed on the trains as being just another example of that. If they were to be completely honest, they would find that the whatever instances of inappropriate sexual behaviour on trains they would be from people who are migrants, recent migrants from cultures very different from that of Western Europe. They would find, but they can't say that because mass migration is a globalist requirement. So they have to tiptoe around those sort of things to produce somehow an anti-white male narrative, which is what they're doing. So I think that could all be dismissed. This 1 in 3 women being sexually assaulted on the fucking trains or on public transport generally can be dismissed as being absolute and utter nonsense, or ginned up and exaggerated to such an extent that it's tantamount to nonsense. Now, I think we need to accept that pretty much every survey study or thing that we see that promotes race and gender, racism is rampant, that sort of thing. Evil Nazis are everywhere. That is all part of the globalist project to demonize white people and to demonize as again, as I mentioned a moment ago, what the globalists see as the people who are losing the most from the globalization project, and also those that would oppose it purely on meritorious grounds, and therefore they have to crush them through a constant and unending and insane propaganda campaign. You've been a Tacitus today, you're a pushback channel. Thank you for listening.